Today is our student award winner presentations from the last year. So every year our department offers 3 awards or awards in 3 different areas. So the first area is projects. So Kayla Bowman is the winner of our outstanding project from this last year. So we'll see a video from her. Kayla could not be here today, but she will have a video to present her project. And then we have Cecil Short, who is the outstanding researcher. And Cecil is on Zoom from his new job in Texas. And so we'll be hearing from Cecil second. And then Megan Nielsen is the outstanding teaching. So she is here to be with us today and will present hers third. Before we jump into this though, are there any announcements? Is there anything from IPSO or any of the classes or anything else that we need to talk about? Okay, well then we will start with Kayla's video. So go ahead and stop the share really quick.
Oh, I didn't optimize that.
Yeah, we've got to optimize it for.
I did that in my head. I was like,
There we go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kayla Bowman, and I graduated from the IP&T program back in April with my master's degree. And I'm really excited to be back in the IP&T program to be able to present on my project. I'm not with you today, not because I'm at the beach, but I'm at a webinar for my work that I was able to help design. I work as an instructional content developer at Henry Schein One, which is a dental software company. And I'm learning a lot about teeth, a lot more than I thought I would ever know. And anyway, it's a really fun job. There's a lot of past IP&T people who work there. So it's fun. It's a good time. So I'll go ahead and share my screen so we can talk a little bit about my project. So my project was called Finding Common Ground, an evaluation for the Careers in Play design team. Just to give you a little outline of what I'm gonna talk about today, I want to start with just talking about how I found my project. That was a question I had when I joined the program, is kind of how are you supposed to figure out what to do? Then I wanted to talk about how I went about designing my evaluation, how I did the data gathering process, how I organized or coded the data, and then how I analyzed the data and how I shared findings and recommendations. And then at the end, bonus that's not on the outline, I'm just going to talk a little bit about why you should do an evaluation project, because it was really fun. So how did I find my project? I started working my first semester in the program as a research assistant for Jason. And he was working on a project that was called Careers in Play. So the purpose of the project was to design educational simulations. So we were specifically focusing on one that would help students kind of feel what it was like to be a cybersecurity professional. It was a really cool project, and it was unique in that the design team was spread out across 3 universities, BYU Indiana University and the University of Maryland. So I got to work with a bunch of different people from those 3 universities and also from different disciplines. So we had instructional designers working on our project. We had people who were, specialists in game design. We had computer scientists, and we had creative writers to kind of create the story of our educational simulation. So it was really fun just working with people from a lot of different backgrounds. As part of the project, I got to fly out to Maryland to meet the team and do some design work in person before COVID kind of made that not a thing anymore. And it was really fun, and we designed a lot of really cool things together. However, during that trip, I noticed a lot of challenges that we had with communication. I was really surprised that even though there were a lot of smart people working on different pieces of the project, we weren't making a lot of progress together. The next semester, I took a project evaluation course, and I just loved the idea of doing evaluations. It reminded me a lot of the movie Robots. One of the characters in that show, his motto is see a need, fill a need. And I really see that that's the point of an evaluation, is you see a need and then you design a way to fill that need. So in talking to the faculty over the design project, we decided we wanted to focus the evaluation around the idea of common ground. And common ground is kind of a common term that we hear all the time, but I really liked this definition given by Clark. So he defines common ground as a set of background facts, assumptions, and beliefs that participants presuppose when they enter a joint activity. So for us, our joint activity was our design work together. And we wanted to study how we were establishing and maintaining this common ground or this foundation that we were working with as we were designing together. So our evaluation questions focused around 3 key areas that all tied to common ground. The first was onboarding. We wanted to see how we established that common ground or that shared knowledge with new team members right from the beginning. We also wanted to look at current state of members who had been on the team for a while. Did they feel like they understood enough about the project or had enough of that shared understanding to perform their jobs efficiently? And lastly, as we started this evaluation, COVID happened. So suddenly our design team that was kind of used to remote work was now forced to work remotely with every single team member. All team members were working separately. So that we saw that as kind of a threat to our common ground because our physical space was no longer shared. So I worked with the faculty on the design team and my committee to develop an interview protocol. And then I held these interviews with 22 team members. And on this slide, you can see I tried to get a variety of opinions, a mixture of student and faculty opinions, a good spread of opinions across the 3 universities, and also making sure I was interviewing members of different teams, whether they were involved with the design or the technology or the research. So a big part of designing an evaluation is you want to make sure your data is accurate and true to the people that you're speaking with, especially when you're doing interviews. So these were 3 things that I did to make sure that my data was trustworthy. I kept an audit trail of emails that I sent to team members and thoughts that I wrote down after interviews and conversations that I had with faculty about the project. I also did peer coding, so I worked with another researcher to refine my coding categories and to make sure that the approach I was taking to the coding was correct and that I wasn't forgetting about any major themes. So I also did member checks, which essentially meant that when I was done writing my report, if I had quoted anyone or used their ideas in my report, I sent them that section just to make sure that I had interpreted the things that they had shared with me correctly. So the coding process. This was the part of the project that I was the least prepared for. I honestly thought it was like computer coding that you would learn from, in classes from Peter or Jeff. But I learned instead that coding, when you talk about interviews, is essentially you're just going through the interviews looking for common themes. So I did, as you can see in this chart, I did several rounds of coding, trying to consolidate the themes that I found into broader categories that I could share back with the team. And at the end, I brought it down to 5 categories. And those 5 categories were what I analyzed in my final report. And they lined up with my initial evaluation questions. So for onboarding and COVID-19, those were pretty straightforward. I was going to present our team's ideas toward our onboarding process and also our team's thoughts about the benefits and challenges of remote work. For current state, I had 3 categories because people had a lot to say about how the team was currently working together. And the comments kind of fell into 3 categories. The first was talking about how they were assigned tasks and whether they liked that process or not. The second was about opportunities to collaborate with other team members and positive or negative comments about how that was happening and it was working really well or how it wasn't happening enough. And there were lots and lots of comments about meetings. On the one hand, a lot of people were complaining about meetings that were too long, that didn't feel relevant to them. And on the other hand, people were asking for more meetings with smaller groups where they could talk about more focused subjects. Of all the data that I sorted through in the coding process, kind of boiled that down to 3 findings. The first one was that the team wanted easier access to project resources. A lot of team members didn't even know what we were trying to accomplish with the project or where they would go to find that out. other team members talked about resources that they had created to kind of explain the project and how they wish that all of the team members could have access to those things that they worked so hard on. The second one was that team members wanted to know what other people were working on. Part of it was kind of a curiosity to say like, oh, I wonder what that team is working on. I hear little whisperings, but I don't really understand what it is. And another thing was there were a lot of comments where team members would say that they were depending on the work of another team, but they didn't know whether the team was working on what they needed or when they would be done. There was just not a lot of communication about that. The last finding was that team members really wanted more focused meetings that were relevant to them. The team members just wanted to understand the purpose behind a meeting and feel that they could really participate and contribute by being in a meeting. So one thing I love about evaluation is you don't stop with the findings. You get to actually tell them your opinion of, hey, I have searched through all of this data and I've talked to all these people, and this is what I think you should do to help solve some of these problems. So the first recommendation was really simple, and it came from team members expressing that they didn't know other members of the team. So they would be asked to collaborate with another student and they had no idea what university that student went to, how to contact them, and what that student's background was. So we created this resource that people could go to where they could find answers to all those questions. The second recommendation was a stand-up meeting. So a lot of team members expressed that they wanted some sort of weekly update. And some people wanted that in the form of an email, others wanted it in the form of a meeting, but they just wanted a really quick update on what team members had accomplished last week, what they were working on this week, and what roadblocks they had, where did they need help. The third recommendation came from our findings about remote work. A lot of the team members expressed that they wanted more interactive meetings. You know, we have these great tools like Zoom, and it gives us opportunities to interact more with each other and allow more team members to participate by using things like breakout rooms or using reactions or, you know, the little raise hand feature if people want to participate and don't feel comfortable just breaking in. So those are my recommendations that I made to my design team. I also just wanted to quickly go over a few things that I learned personally from the evaluation. So the first thing I learned is pretty simple. The interviews helped me understand my team members better. I think sometimes as designers, we get really focused on our own work, and sometimes we don't take the time to step back and try to understand the people who we have to collaborate with in order to make our content. The second thing that I learned that I kind of alluded to earlier is that the coding process was very intense. So I would just suggest to anyone who has to do interview coding, give yourself lots and lots of time to be able to perform that. It's so essential to your project, but it takes a lot of time to accomplish. The last thing that I learned is I wish that I had given more frequent updates rather than waiting till the end of my project to kind of give my recommendations that my team could have acted on and maybe could have solved problems and made things better a little bit earlier. So I'll turn my floating head back on for this last part. I just wanted to end with a why you should do an evaluation soapbox. When I think of evaluation, I think this robots quote, see a need, fill a need, really captures it. There are so many needs out there that if you are looking or even a little bit interested in doing an evaluation project, there's so many people out there who need things, who need solutions to their problems. And it's really, really fulfilling to design an evaluation and just go through the whole process of really trying to understand a problem and then recommending some solutions. So even for those of you out there like me, who just love design and want to do a design project over and over, think about evaluation because I learned a lot from it and I think it made me a lot better designer. So thanks for having me and listening to my project. If you have any questions, you can get my contact information from the department. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Hey, Cecil, you can just go.
All right. So I can see that we have like 20-ish people here online. How many people do we have there in person? Because I can see like 3 people maybe on the camera. Oh, there we go. Oh, lots of people. That's great. So I'm Cecil Short. I graduated with my doctoral degree just this past summer. It seems like it was years ago and also a lifetime ago. And in a lot of ways, I guess it was. Instead of talking about my research, because I realized that as a new professor, trying to talk about my research for only 12 minutes is very difficult. I don't know if you've ever tried to talk to a professor about their research before. But also I realized that doing so would give Jason an unfair advantage in the Research and Theory Designs Theory Spotlight Competition, AACT, next month, where we have to compete head to head against each other. And so to prevent that, I thought maybe I'd take a different approach to my presentation today. And really what I want to talk about is why you should think about doing research as a graduate student. Now, I know Kayla just talked about how, you know, she was doing an evaluation project. She was really just interested in design that led to doing research. And I was like, well, you know, research is really an important part of the graduate student experience, regardless of what track you're on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Here is my information. So if you want to contact me or know more about me, you can. If you really are interested in what my research looks like, you can find it on my website. You can reach out to me on Twitter. You can email me via my website. I just started a YouTube channel where I'm talking about my research, and you can learn about my program here at Texas Tech by going to bit.ly/BLPLTTU. But today I want to talk about you and your research and the things that you can and should be doing as a graduate student with research. So let's talk about the 5 W's. Now, as you guys are all probably aware, the 5 W's are who, what, where, when, and why. Notice that I did not put how on there. And that is simply because there are like entire programs and degrees dedicated to how to do research. And I feel like I don't have that kind of time today. But I did want to talk about those questions. So what is research? No, you know what? I can do you one better. Let's do why is research. I think a lot of you might be thinking to yourself, like, why do I really want to do research? And there are lots of downsides to research. So maybe we can start with those. First of all, if you do research, you will learn that research can be really lonely. So unless the last year and a half has just made you feel too connected to people, you're just tired of seeing people's full faces, I could understand why research might not be something you're interested in. Research can also be slow and time consuming. As Kayla just mentioned about coding those interviews, yes, going through the research process is very slow. And sometimes even Sisyphean. If you don't know who Sisyphus was, he was the figure from Greek mythology who had to push the rock up the hill in the underworld, only to get it near the top and have it come back down again. Working on my dissertation research, I lost dozens of hours of coding total, but on multiple occasions, I lost several hours worth of coding. And it started to feel very Sisyphean. I felt like I was never going to graduate because the research was going to take way too long. I did finally graduate and get the research done. And one of my research articles that I submitted got categorically rejected from the journal that I submitted it to. And so after you go through this whole process, these faceless, nameless dementors of research at a journal will tell you that they're not going to publish it. And so that is also, you know, a reason that some people might be like, I don't know if I want to do this. If you've ever seen people talk about research on social media, you'll also know that research can be untrustworthy. Sometimes we have to do research to make sure that our research is founded in research that has been founded by other research. It's all very circular in its logic, to be honest. But we have to go through this process of, do I even know what I think I know? And then lastly, if you decide to do research, you can make research your own personal trigger word. When you are on social media, 1 out of 8 posts can now trigger you into thinking, man, that is watching the news for 5 minutes a night is not research. Reading that post from your uncle is not research. And during an election cycle, you can boost that up to 1 out of every 2 posts. Now, I can see that some of you are probably now thinking, man, I'm so glad that I'm not on the research track. Well, I would remind you of what Kayla just told us. Being on the research track often includes having to do research. And so you really can't escape this. So let's talk about some of the benefits of actually doing research. Let's talk about some of the good things that can come out of it. First of all, doing research does allow you to create a voice for change. Hopefully change for the better. But it allows you to have a voice. It allows you to enter into this academic conversation. Yes, that conversation is slow, but it's a conversation that can be easily tracked, can be easily measured, can be easily evaluated. One of my favorite reasons for doing research is that I've been able to collaborate with some amazing people, whether it was other students, whether it was faculty members, and that has helped me in my brief 4-month career, has helped me immensely in what I'm trying to accomplish and what I want to do. It's helped me to be able to be recognized. One of the most surreal moments I have had since starting my graduate program was being at a convention and having someone come up to me and be like, oh yeah, I read this, or like, oh my gosh, I love your book. I actually had a guy come up to me, he's like, oh, Cecil, it's so nice to meet you. And I was like, I don't know who you are, I'm so sorry. And he's like, oh, I'm Jeff Carpenter, we published together. And I was like, oh, cool, yeah, it is nice to meet you. Another reason, you can get paid. As Kayla mentioned, she worked as a research assistant to Jason. And so that's an even better reason. So in short, research can lead you to power, prestige, and property. It also allows you to learn how to, use the term research correctly and identify that most of the times you see the word research used anywhere in popular or social media, that they do not understand what research really is. All right, so that's why I know that we are going to be short on time. Pun it may be intended. So we'll tackle the next two together. We can do when and where together. So when should you do research? Now would be a great time. And if you're thinking, I'm in seminar, I'm really dedicated to paying attention. I can see some of you are shopping for shoes. That's okay. Later today also works. That would also be a great time. Now, the best time to start research would be yesterday, and an even better time would have been last summer. I think I was fortunate in that I started doing research as a graduate student 2 months before my coursework started. Charles and I were, communicating about me moving to Utah and getting started with research and my goals. And he said, hey, I have a research project that I think you could help on. I was on it for like 2 weeks before, we probably realized, no, I couldn't help on it. But I was able to start that research immediately. And it allowed me, when I got to my own research, to have this depth of experience and knowledge and know what to expect, because I was working on somebody else's research. I wasn't controlling the process like I would when I was working on my own research. So starting research really as soon as you can, I think is the best thing. Where should you do research? In your classes, there's tons of opportunities to relate what you're doing in classes to research, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But also outside of your classes. One of the most prolific things that I was taught as a graduate student at BYU was that what you see in this graphic. I was recording a Dr. Yanchar lecture for students who couldn't be there that day, and the recording started off with him saying, well, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure coming to class is the best way to learn. And that's not to say you shouldn't go to class. What you learn in classes will be very important. But I think a lot of what I learned and what I use on my day-to-day, similar to what Kayla was saying, was the stuff I was involved in outside of my coursework. The research that I was doing with others, the research that I was doing myself. I think that really allowed me to connect to my classes in a new way. And so, research in your class, research outside of your class, and research is like a tree. The best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago, but the second best time is today. So if you haven't started research yet, now is the time to start. Okay, so we've where, when, what. So what should we research? That is a great question. A lot of graduate students, and I fell into this trap, I think we can get bogged down by wanting to research everything. I would encourage you not to research everything, but I would encourage you to start with something. That can be something that you're interested in. I felt like I was very fortunate that the research that I was interested in doing was the reason that I came to BYU. I had actually applied to other graduate programs, and they're like, yeah, your application is great, but we don't have anyone to support your research interests. I was like, well, now I got to find the people doing research that I'm interested in, which led me to Dr. Graham. So I was fortunate that there was somebody doing research that I was interested in that I could, be part of. But you can also research things you're not interested in. Up until I think last week, my most highly cited article was this. I was so sad about this because I was afraid people were gonna be like, hey, you should do more of this research. But it was research that I did with Dr. Kimmons and Dr. Carpenter that I mentioned earlier, and McCoo and Kyle. And it was a Twitter study, and like that, those are not methods that I want to pursue. I think they're great for Royce, and I'm glad people are doing them. But like it was this Twitter study that we had done, and while it was still focused on teachers, which is where my interests lie, a lot of the methods and stuff were things that I was like pretty disinterested in. But I was still happy to be part of that because I learned so much about writing, about the research process, about publishing from that. Ultimately, my suggestion would be research what is going to help you in your classes and research what's going to help you graduate. I have said this many times. When you are thinking about a thesis or dissertation, there are really two options that you can pursue. The one option is something you're really interested and passionate about. The other option is the one that's going to help you graduate. I would always err on the side of graduation. That is my biggest piece of advice. But I think research is just important. It doesn't matter what you're researching, but get involved in research somehow. So when it does come time for you to research something that you want to know about, you understand the process. Lastly, who should we research? Or should we research the Who, either the band or the Dr. Seuss characters? I'm going to phrase this a little bit differently, and who should we do research with? My first suggestion would be do it with other graduate students. I loved being able to help graduate students who had been in the program longer than me graduate. I mentioned Bob Bodley earlier. I was able to help Emily Pullen with some of her research and help her graduate. And then when it came time for me to seek help for my research, I had been on the other side. And so I knew better what people would need from me to really assist with my research. As Kayla mentioned, you can research with IP&T faculty. All of them have research agendas and probably have projects that they would love help with. You can research with non-IP&T faculty. I know several graduate students who have researched with professors outside of the department. You can even research with non-BYU faculty. If you're looking to get involved with research, I have a whole host of projects here at Texas Tech that I'd love to share. And that's not just like it is kind of a selfish plug, but there are lots of people that you can research with. One of the things I was also able to do as a graduate student was apply for a fellowship. And so I actually got some of my research funded by the Learning Accelerator. It was like they were already doing what I was interested in researching. So I just got paid by them to do it. And it was great. It was part of my dissertation anyway. It was stuff I was going to need to do anyway. But really, you can research with anyone. I would suggest finding someone who can help you understand the methods and the research when you're getting started. But ultimately, I think what's great is that when you collaborate on research together, it really does make the process less intimidating. It allows it to feel much less lonely, and you can really learn a lot from each other and help direct your future, whether that future is on the design track or a research track or an evaluation track. So those are the 5 W's. I would be remiss if I didn't surprise you with a 6th W, which is, of course, you have to share your research. And so there's also a writing element that often goes with this. I was fortunate that coming out of my graduate program, I had been able to be on several research projects that got published. And I know that gave me an edge when I was looking for a job. Now, of course, I was looking for a faculty position, and many of you may be looking for different positions, but there's something about saying, hey, I've published this, people have approved my work, that I think really allows you to have a competitive edge. But none of the research that I did I do alone, and same with the writing process. This is as close as I could get to a list of everybody that I did research with and published with during the short 4 years that I was at BYU. And many of these people I'm still working with today. I'm still doing research projects with and helping them with their research and continuing on with new research projects. And so it really is this collaborative effort that I think sometimes gets overlooked. But I would encourage you to pursue it. Last thing that I would say is for those of you who are like, yeah, sold, already doing research because I'm required to, but thank you for reminding me that like it's a good thing. Persevere, keep the faith, keep moving forward. Like I said, research can often feel Sisyphean. Know that you are not alone. This last year and a half I know has been really difficult. With the pandemic, especially not being able to be in the lab and have the opportunities to see other people working on things that you're working on and discuss your work with other people. Hopefully, as we continue to move through, and hopefully it is through and not further into this pandemic, we're finding more opportunities for that collaboration to share what it is we're researching and what we're interested in. So if you have research interests that you have not talked about yet, please find somebody in the department to talk to about those interests. Find out what research projects are ongoing in the department and how you can get involved, how you can help. Even the smallest bit of help sometimes can make a huge difference for somebody working on research. So that's it. I think I've used enough of my time. If you have questions for me, or again, if you really want to know what my research looks like right now, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. You can email me at cecilrshort@gmail.com, or again, go to my website to reach out to me at cecilrshort.com. Thanks, everyone.
And all the faculty will have their offices open afterward. Sure, you can do research for this.
Okay. So I'm Megan Nielsen, and I'm going to talk to you guys about teaching. And I'm very glad I went last, because I feel like my experience teaching within the department has really encompassed everything that's been talked about today. I've been able to do lots of design work. I've been able to do evaluation, and it's also led to research opportunities and other really fun opportunities by being able to teach. So just a little bit about my background. Switch. There we go. So I have an undergrad in elementary education. So I love teaching. I'm trained to teach. When I was an undergrad, I was a TA for an IP&T class on instructional design and assessment. That's how I learned about the program. That's how I got my husband to be interested in the program. And now it's my turn, so I get to be in it now. And I was a TA for that class for 2 years and learned a ton about design, and it really piqued my interest. And I loved that each semester, the class we were teaching was never the same. We were always taking feedback from our students and applying it to what we were teaching and how we were teaching in order to make the class better. Some people might find that frustrating, but I found that enjoyable to never be teaching the exact same class. And then after I graduated with my undergrad degree, I taught first grade for 3 years. And then I stayed home after I had my first daughter. And then I came into the program when she was almost 2. And when I came into the program, I started teaching IP&T 372, which is another undergrad course that is focusing on coding and computational thinking for the elementary classroom. I teach the elementary sections with Dr. Rich, and then Heather teaches the secondary sections of this course. There's also 2 other IP&T undergrad courses for education majors that Dr. Graham and Dr. Kimmins teach about tech integration and online and blended learning. So if any of those are interesting to you guys, feel free to reach out to any of them, and I'm sure they are happy to talk to you guys about teaching. those courses. And so this class, we focus a lot on computational thinking, like I mentioned. We go through and teach our students how to code different programs for younger elementary students from kindergarten up through 2nd grade. Also for older students, 3rd through 6th grade. We do lots of hands-on experiences with like physical like robots, and we use these things called microbits, and just other kind of getting students excited about coding and getting them excited to teach their future students about coding. And then we also focus on classroom integration, how after you've learned how to do this thing that lots of people don't have much experience doing, how can you then take that into your classroom and teach your future students about that? So like I mentioned, most of our students are elementary or early childhood education majors. They come into our class with little to no coding experience, but they leave with a much higher confidence in their ability to code and their ability to teach coding. When I first started teaching this course, this is the 7th semester that it's been taught. I've taught every single semester except this last spring and summer because I was pregnant. And so I've been able to see how this course has developed over time, which I've really enjoyed. And one of my favorite things is seeing these students at the end of the semester, just leaving with all of these skills that they never thought that they could ever have. And here is just some data that we collect at the beginning and the end of each semester. We give them a survey that just asks about their initial beliefs about coding, about their own abilities about coding. And as you can see right here, most of them at the beginning of the semester think coding's pretty important. By the end of the semester, it's even higher. They still think it's important, so that's good. We don't want them to think it's not important at the end of the semester. But these ones are always some of my favorite things to see. About like their abilities to code themselves or to teach coding are always very low at the beginning of the semester, and by the end they've shot sky high. And then this one about their anxiety to learn how to code is always very high. By the end of the semester, it's gone down. And then this one at the end again is also one of my favorite things to see. Is most people come in with like hardly any expectation or confidence in being able to teach coding to their students. And by the end of the semester, they again have shot up way high in their confidence and their abilities. When I started teaching this course, I also had 0 coding experience. I was about 6 weeks ahead of my students when I first started. So it was very fresh in my mind about how frustrating the experience could be, how completely new the experience could be, but it also made me realize what a great learning opportunity it was. And I remind my students of that often, that this is something new to you. And most of you probably haven't had to experience something new like this, or had to learn something that was this hard in a long time. But it's a really good reminder for you as a teacher to go through this experience so that you can remember what that's like, so that when your students are frustrated with learning something new, you can be like, oh yeah, remember when I learned how to code and it was the most frustrating experience of my life? But now I can do it and I'm glad that I can. That experience then helps them have empathy towards their own students when they're going through hard times in their learning process. So like I mentioned, in the first class that I taught as an undergrad, we did lots of iterative design, and we continue to do that in this course that I teach right now. The first semester it was taught, we were very focused on using kind of like a third-party curriculum, was kind of our main focus. We really wanted students just to learn how to use a program called Scratch. It's a very basic, very common coding program for elementary students. So there were lots of code-along videos from a place called Boot Up PD that is used across elementary schools. So we wanted students to be exposed to that, but we found that students really got scratched out. They were sick of Scratch by the end of the semester. So we went completely back to the drawing board and figured out what we could do to make it different. This first semester, we also had a gamified course, and we found out that that didn't add anything to our course. If anything, it just made it more frustrating for students to be able to navigate the course and figure out what they were supposed to do. So the next semester, we added more variety to the coding programs that we used. And we also included using some HTML and CSS, which lots of students were a little concerned about, but they all did fine and were excited to learn it. We also did more in-class learning. Instead of going home, watching the video, learning it on your own, then coming back to class. We did a lot more in class together, coding all with each other. We also had a bigger emphasis on computational thinking and integrating that within the content. So instead of here, learn how to code, now we're just saying, okay, we're learning how to code. And we're also going to be teaching you how to use this in your classrooms. We also had the addition of a makerspace. We were going to be starting to use that at the end of the semester, where students could come together, create things together, just get experience with makerspaces, so that they could then take that experience into the schools when they go to either create their own or to start using one if their schools had one. But then COVID hit, and we were planning our makerspace at the end of the semester, and we didn't get to do it. So we then again had to quickly shift and figure out, okay, we have all these supplies for makerspace. We want this to be something our students know how to do and are exposed to. So how can we kind of shift that to an online arena? So then that spring and summer, it was a completely online course. It was the first time it was fully online, and teaching coding online is hard when you're in a live setting. If anything, just because most people are on a laptop or an iPad and you don't have enough screens. It's really hard to be able to see the instructor, see what I'm coding on the screen, also to have your own coding screen up and be following along. And then it's also hard for me as a teacher to be able to see all of my students, to know if anyone was having a problem, and to see the chat and to be coding all at the same time. So there were lots of difficulties with it, but we learned and we got better at it. And then we also added a new assignment using the code.org website. If many of you have probably heard of that. It's a great introductory website that lots of teachers use. We had them do a complete unit, and we found that this was giving students a really good base in coding. They would come in without, like I mentioned, having any background in coding at all. But by giving them this code.org assignment, they were able to kind of get their feet wet really quick with learning how to do coding and doing it in a way that was very step-by-step, very guided. And we found that it's giving our students a really good foundation to then continue in the semester as we learn other coding programs and apply coding concepts to different projects. So last fall, we added, again, we're changing things, we're trying to make things better. We're doing this a lot based on feedback we're getting from students. So we had the addition of TA lab hours, and this I think has made one of the biggest differences in our course. We have lab hours for usually 2 to 3 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week, most semesters, where students can come and get help with their assignments. They can work on their projects. If they have any problems with anything, they can come talk to me or one of the other TAs for the course. And giving them that much support has really been helpful to them, especially because this is such a brand new concept for so many of them, that they want to make sure they're getting it right, and they want to have somebody actually there to answer their questions instead of just sending an email. And we found that that has helped so much. And I think I forgot to mention, this is only a 1 credit course. And so we give them a ton of support and put in a lot of time into this course to really help our students learn and understand. Even though it's only a 1 credit class. Because it's only 1 credit class, one of the biggest pieces of feedback we get is that it's too much work for a 1 credit class. But we have been able to kind of fine tune our assignments, and we have finally gotten them into like a good, reasonable range that we feel confident, even though we still get that feedback. Yes, Peter.
The only change I would make on this last one is in fall of 2020, we offered extra credit to do the survey.
Yes, so in fall, I guess I got my dates mixed up. So we had a survey with each assignment where we would ask them how much time they spent on the assignment, how proud of the assignment they were, what else? What they learned about it, if they had any questions about the assignment, just in a Google form. And then we, as the TAs and instructors, would look at that. We could use the questions in our next class. We could respond to students directly about their specific questions. So in fall 2020, we offered that survey. And we offered extra credit. If you filled it out, you got 1 extra credit point on your assignment. We didn't have the best variety of students who were filling that out. We were getting the students who were excited about the assignments, who were doing well on the assignments, to fill out that survey, and we weren't catching the students who were kind of falling off on the edges. So the next semester, we had that be a required part of each assignment. You get 1 point on your assignment if you fill out the survey. And that just really helped us be able to see the full breadth of our students and kind of understand how everyone was doing, not just a select few. Also, in winter semester, we changed the code.org assignment. Instead of doing a complete course, we only had them do an hour of code project. which again is something that they probably would be experiencing as teachers in the classroom. We wanted to expose them to that. It takes less time. For like elementary students, it would take about an hour. For adults, it takes like 20 to 30 minutes. So we felt that that's still a good introduction to coding that really sets our students on a good foundation for the rest of the semester. We also removed the HTML and CSS portion because that was something that they wouldn't necessarily be using with their students in the classroom. And we decided to kind of replace the time we spent on that by adding more info on the integration and how to actually use this in our classroom. We felt that we were doing a really good job at getting students comfortable with coding, exposed to coding, and kind of knowing what they should be doing as a coder themselves, but we were kind of missing that piece, missing the emphasis on how to actually like use this in your classroom. So now the last 2-ish weeks of the semester, we've just been talking about, okay, now that you've learned how to code, you've done and worked on this all semester, how does this actually look in the classroom? We talk about it in bits and pieces, but we really dedicate those last 2 weeks to like fully talking about it. And then this semester, we're back to in-person classes, which is great. It's a lot easier to teach coding in person when I can walk around and see my students and see what their computers are looking like and see what they're doing. We also switched the order of assignments just because of something that's unique about our class and unique about our students is that elementary ed majors are usually off for about a month in the middle of the semester when they go into the schools basically for a full day. And so in the past, we also have kind of taken off that month and haven't held classes. We've had very minimal assignments being due. Some of their assignments are to create a like tech lesson and then to use that in their classroom that they're teaching in. And so this semester, we are actually going to continue to have classes throughout the semester. They won't get a break, but we'll just be switching those to being online courses. And because of that, we've kind of switched the order that we've done things. Up to this point, we had a pretty good flow of how we liked things, how students seemed to be able to learn pretty well. But this semester, we're switching it up and seeing how it goes. And then we also have a new assignment that started in the summer where they first piloted it of using a digital storyboard, which is just another way to use some of the coding things that we've been talking about, giving more time to specific hardware that they've been learning about and learning how to use. So from this experience, from teaching this course for the last 7 semesters, I've learned that teaching provides many opportunities. Kind of like I mentioned, I've gotten lots of design experience, restructuring the class, refiguring out how to make things better, including with that evaluation. We're talking about our class, we're getting feedback from our students, figuring out what they like, what they don't like, how to make it better. By teaching this class and working with Dr. Rich, I've also had an opportunity to do a lot of research. We undertook a massive research project looking at all of the different coding tools used in elementary classes and research articles about them that we worked on for like a 1.5-ish that we finally got it finished up this summer. And then by teaching this class, I also got lots of opportunities to work on my master's project. And from like teaching this course, it's given me lots of experience to now work on my master's project, which is to create a course similar to this that's combining pieces of this course that I'm teaching as well as the other IP&T courses for education majors and creating a course that's specifically for early childhood majors. Just because I have experience teaching in the younger elementary classroom, that early childhood classroom. And so I'm really excited about it. And because I've had this opportunity to teach, it's given me so many opportunities and have really, really enjoyed that. Something else I've learned, you're never done designing. You can always make things better. At some point in some situations, you do just need to decide to be done. But in something like this, it's good to always be continuing to redesign and to figure things out and to make it better. Feedback and data are super helpful when you're making design decisions. Like I mentioned, everything that we change in the course is usually based in some sort of feedback or some sort of data that we have from our students. And every semester is different. Every class is so different. In semesters where I've taught 2 classes, my first class has a completely different personality than my second class. And that's what I think makes it exciting, is that you can kind of tailor how you're teaching to these different groups of students, and just their interactions are just so different. And it makes it so you never feel like you're just doing the same thing over and over again, which I really enjoy. And you don't need to know everything to start. Like I said, when I first started teaching this course, I had only been coding for maybe 6 weeks. And so you don't need to know everything to start. You don't need to be a teacher beforehand to teach. There's lots of support, lots of help that you can get if you are interested in trying. That's it. If you have questions for me, I'll be hanging out for Soup Kitchen.
I'm glad to have had our 3 students present. That concludes seminar for today. Anyone on Zoom, if you're close by and want to come get some soup, feel free to do so. And we'll see you all next week.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You got your